I hadn't spoken to another human being in 3 days, but when I heard Paktan Cha whispered outside the Meridian Hotel, I knew silence would make me complicit in murder. The November wind cut through Lexington Avenue like a blade, turning the steam from the subway grates into ghostly columns that twisted between towers of glass and steel. I was huddled against the hotel's exhaust vent, my cardboard shelter doing nothing against the cold that seeped into my bones. The smell of expensive perfume and leather interiors drifted from the valet circle, mixing with the stale coffee scent clinging to my torn jacket. This was my life now. Invisible. Forgotten. A piece of human debris that wealthy hotel guests stepped over without seeing. I was calculating whether the church 3 blocks over would still have soup kitchen hours when I heard them. 2 men stood beside a black Mercedes parked near the hotel entrance, their voices low and urgent. Cring. I'd interpreted for Samsung executives for 5 years before my world collapsed. Before my daughter Maya died. Before the streets became my only address. But these words, these specific words, I recognized even through the fog of exhaustion and hunger. They were young, early 20s, dressed in designer suits that didn't quite hide the weapons bulging at their ribs. I should have kept my head down. Invisible was safe. Invisible meant surviving another night. But then one of them said it, clear as a gunshot cutting through the wind. Paktan Choino. Castellano Onul Bam Juknunda. Bomb in the car. Castellano dies tonight. My blood turned to ice. My eyes snapped to where they were looking. Across the valet circle, a midnight blue Bentley gleamed under golden hotel lights. 4 men in tailored black suits surrounded it, standing with military precision. One guard had his hand on the rear door handle waiting. And at the center of that protective circle stood Viktor Castellano. I'd seen his face on muted news broadcasts in hospital waiting rooms, in newspapers I'd used as blankets. The man who controlled half the city's underground. The name that made prosecutors resign and cops look the other way. Tall, moving with lethal grace, his charcoal suit probably worth more than I'd made in 6 months when I had a salary. Even from 30 feet away I could feel the weight of his presence. People moved around him like water around stone. One of the guards raised his key fob. The Bentley's lights flashed. Everything in my survival instinct screamed. Stay down. Stay silent. Stay alive. But I thought of Maya. 7 years old, holding my hand at the crosswalk. How I'd been staring at my phone, distracted by a work email that didn't matter. How I'd stayed silent for 3 crucial seconds while she stepped off the curb into traffic. How I'd spent 2 years punishing myself for failing to scream when it mattered most. My body moved before my brain could stop it. Wait. My voice cracked, hoarse from disuse. Too loud. Too desperate. Don't open that door. Everything stopped. 6 men turned toward me in perfect, predatory synchronization. I stumbled forward from the exhaust vent, my duct-taped sneakers slipping on frozen concrete. Wind whipped my filthy hair across my face. I looked exactly like what I was. A homeless, desperate woman who'd just screamed at the most dangerous man in New York. But it was Viktor Castellano who held my gaze. Not with anger. Not with confusion. With curiosity. He turned fully toward me, one hand raised in a gesture that froze his guards mid-reach for their weapons. Those storm-gray eyes locked onto mine with an intensity that made my breath catch, pinning me in place like a butterfly under glass. Say it again, he said. His voice was quiet, controlled, the kind that could order executions without raising an octave. My throat was dry as sand. Don't get in the car. Why not? I jerked my chin toward the Mercedes. I heard them. Cring. They said Paktan bomb. They put it in the car. For 3 seconds no one moved. Then Victor smiled. It wasn't kind. Dante. Check the Bentley. His crew-cut guard approached the midnight blue car, crouched by the wheel well, swept a flashlight along the undercarriage. He went completely still. Boss. Dante's voice was tight. She's right. There's a device. The world tilted. Everyone back. Now. The explosion was a fist of heat and sound that slammed me into the hotel wall. Glass showered down. Flames licked 20 feet into the air. When my vision cleared through the smoke and chaos, Viktor Castellano stood untouched, those cold gray eyes still locked on me. Not on the burning wreckage. On me. Hands grabbed my arms, hauling me upright. "Take her," Viktor said, his voice cutting through the sirens. "We need to talk." And just like that, the beggar woman who'd saved the Mafia boss became his most dangerous problem. The SUV's leather seats were colder than the street. They'd stripped me of my cardboard, my blanket, the plastic bag that held everything I owned, a broken phone charger, 3 expired granola bars, a photo of Maya I kept in a Ziploc bag. Gone. All of it thrown into a dumpster like the trash everyone already thought it was. Dante sat beside me, his hand resting casually on the gun at his hip. The message was clear. Don't move, don't speak, don't breathe wrong. Another guard drove in silence, navigating through back alleys I didn't recognize. The city lights blurred past tinted windows, turning familiar streets into alien territory. Viktor Castellano sat across from me in the rear-facing seat, perfectly still, those storm-gray eyes never leaving my face. He hadn't spoken since we'd left the burning wreckage of his Bentley. Hadn't blinked. Just watched me like I was the equation he was solving in real time. The SUV descended into an underground parking garage, spiraling down level after level until we were so deep I couldn't hear the sirens anymore. Just the echo of our engine and the drip of water from concrete ceiling pipes. We stopped in a corner far from the elevators, surrounded by shadows and support pillars. The driver killed the engine. Silence pressed in like a physical weight. "Out," Dante said. My legs barely held me when I stumbled onto the oil-stained concrete. The air down here was different. Thick, stale, tasting of exhaust and something metallic that might have been old blood. Viktor emerged from the SUV with that same fluid grace, adjusting his cufflinks like we were at a business meeting instead of an interrogation. Dante grabbed my shoulder, spun me around and shoved me against the SUV's hood. Cold metal bit through the thin sweater they'd given me. Then I felt it, the hard press of a gun barrel against the base of my skull. "Don't move," Dante said quietly. Viktor walked around to face me, his expression carved from ice. "Who sent you?" "Nobody sent me. I told you. The Koreans. The Irish. The Bratva." His voice was clinical, detached. "Which organization are you working for?" "None. I'm nobody." Panic cracked my voice. "I'm homeless. I sleep on the street. I don't even know what the Bratva is." Dante pressed the gun harder against my skull. "She's lying, boss. Street people don't speak Korean. This is a setup. I used to be an interpreter." The words tumbled out desperate and fast. "Corporate work. 5 years with Harrison and Lee. I translated for Samsung, LG, Korean trade delegations. I lost my job after. My throat closed. After my daughter died. I couldn't afford rent. The streets were all I had left." Viktor studied me with those merciless eyes. "What did you hear them say?" "Exactly. Paktan choi no aseo." The Korean words felt clumsy on my tongue after 2 years of silence. "Castellano onul bam jugnunda." Something shifted in Viktor's expression. "Dante. Call Minjun." "Boss, she could have been coached." "Now." Dante stepped back, the gun leaving my skull, and I sucked in a shaking breath. He pulled out his phone, made a call, spoke in low tones. 3 minutes later, footsteps echoed through the garage. The man who approached was slight, mid-30s, wearing wire-rimmed glasses and a concerned expression. "Minjun," I assumed. He looked at me with something like pity before turning to Viktor. "Test her," Viktor said. Minjun switched to Korean, rapid-fire questions that made my brain scramble to keep up. "What's your name? Where did you learn Korean? What company did you work for? What were the men wearing? What exactly did they say?" I answered in broken, textbook Korean, stumbling over pronunciation, forgetting words, mixing up particles the way someone does when they learned from books instead of immersion. My accent was terrible. My grammar worse. But the words were right. Minjun asked harder questions. Technical terms. Directions. Commands to describe what I saw. I answered as best I could, my voice shaking, sweat running down my spine despite the cold. Finally, Minjun turned to Viktor and switched back to English. She's telling the truth. Her Korean is terrible. Formal, academic, learned from textbooks and business contexts. Not street Korean. Not conversational. But she understood the words Poktan and Cha correctly. She's not a professional plant. He paused. She's exactly what she says she is. A former interpreter who got lucky. The silence that followed was deafening. Viktor stared at me for a long, terrible moment. I saw something flicker behind those gray eyes. Not warmth, not kindness, but maybe recognition. Like he was seeing me as a person for the first time instead of a threat. You risked your life, he said slowly, to save a stranger. I couldn't just let you die. My voice came out as a whisper. Why not? Most people would have kept walking. I thought of Maya's hand slipping from mine. The screech of tires. The silence that followed. Because I already know what it feels like to stay silent when someone dies, I said. I won't do it again. Viktor's jaw tightened. He looked at Dante, then at Minjun, then back at me. When he spoke, his voice was quiet but absolute. You're coming with me until I know you're not a liability. You'll be kept safe, fed, given proper clothing. But you don't leave until I say so. He stepped closer and I smelled expensive cologne and gunpowder. Do you understand, Sienna Vale? I understood perfectly. I'd saved the Mafia boss's life and now I was his prisoner. Yes, I whispered. Viktor nodded once. Get her in the car. The estate rose from the darkness like something out of a nightmare. All iron gates and security cameras. Floodlights cutting through the night like prison searchlights. The SUV passed through 3 checkpoints before we reached the main house. A sprawling structure of marble and steel that looked more like a fortress than a home. Dante escorted me through a side entrance, down hallways lined with expensive art I was too terrified to appreciate. My duct-taped sneakers squeaked on polished floors that probably cost more than my entire former life. A woman waited at the top of a curved staircase. 50s, steel-gray hair pulled into a tight bun, wearing a black dress that screamed old-world efficiency. Her eyes swept over me with the warmth of a medical examiner studying a corpse. This is Elena, Dante said. She'll get you settled. Elena nodded once, crisp and dismissive. Follow me. The bedroom she led me to was obscene. Larger than the apartment I'd lost after Maya died, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking manicured gardens lit by subtle ground lights. A 4-poster bed dominated the space, covered in silk sheets that probably cost more than a month's rent. There was an ensuite bathroom with a tub deep enough to drown in and a shower with 6 different heads. Clothes in the closet, Elena said, her accent faintly Russian. Your size was estimated. If anything doesn't fit, leave it on the bed and I'll replace it tomorrow. She gestured to a tray on the nightstand. Dinner. Eat. She turned to leave. Wait, I said. How long am I staying here? Elena's expression didn't change. Until Mr. Castellano says otherwise. She paused at the door, her eyes flicking to the cuts on my hands, the bruise blooming on my temple from where I'd hit the wall. Medical supplies are in the bathroom cabinet. Use them. Then she was gone, the door clicking shut with a finality that sounded like a cell lock. I stood in the middle of that enormous room shaking. The clothes in the closet were expensive. Cashmere sweaters, designer jeans, silk pajamas. All in my size, just like Elena said. How did they know? Had they been watching me on the streets, cataloging me like a specimen before tonight? The food on the tray smelled incredible. Roasted chicken, vegetables that looked like they'd been picked that morning, bread still warm from the oven. My stomach cramped with hunger, but when I tried to eat, I managed 3 bites before nausea forced me to stop. My body had forgotten how to process real food. I showered until the water ran cold, scrubbing 2 years of street grime from my skin. Then I found the medical supplies Elena had mentioned: antiseptic, bandages, antibiotic ointment for the infected cuts on my hands and feet. I treated them mechanically, feeling nothing. The bed was too soft. The sheets too clean. The silence too complete. I lay there for 2 hours, staring at the ceiling, my mind spinning through everything that had happened. The bomb. The explosion. Viktor's eyes locked on mine through the smoke. The gun pressed to my skull in the parking garage. Finally, I gave up on sleep and wandered into the hallway. The house was quiet but not empty. I could feel the weight of security, guards stationed at intervals I couldn't see. I drifted through halls until I saw light spilling from a partially open door. Viktor's study was all dark wood and leather, walls lined with books that looked actually read instead of decorative. He sat behind a massive desk, reading something on his laptop, a glass of amber liquid at his elbow. He'd removed his jacket and tie, rolled up his sleeves, but somehow looked no less dangerous. He glanced up when I appeared in the doorway. No surprise. Like he'd known I'd come. "Can't sleep." His voice was quieter than before, almost gentle. "The bed's too soft." Something that might have been amusement flickered across his face. "Come in." I stepped into the study, my borrowed clothes hanging loose on my frame. Viktor closed his laptop, leaned back in his chair and studied me with that same intense focus. "Why did you do it?" he asked. "Scream that warning. Most people wouldn't stop to spit on you, Sienna. Why risk your life for mine?" The question cracked something open inside me. I'd been holding it together through the explosion, the interrogation, the absurdity of being brought to this mansion. But this simple question shattered my walls. 2 years ago, I whispered, my daughter Maya was 7. We were at a crosswalk on 9th Avenue. I was on my phone reading a work email about a contract negotiation that didn't matter. She asked me something, I don't even remember what, and I said, "Hold on, baby," without looking up. Viktor went very still. She stepped off the curb. I heard the car's engine, that moment of acceleration, but I didn't process what it meant. Didn't look up until I heard the screech of tires. My voice broke. She died holding my hand. And I'd been silent for 3 seconds when I should have screamed. The silence that followed was suffocating. When I finally looked up, Viktor's expression had shifted. The cold calculation was still there, but underneath it was something raw, something that looked like recognition. Like he understood the specific weight of guilt that comes from failing to save someone you should have protected. "So when you heard them talking about the bomb," he said slowly, "you screamed." I stayed silent when it mattered most once before. I wiped at my eyes, angry at the tears. I won't make that mistake again. Even for a stranger. Even for someone like you. Viktor stood, walked to the window, his back to me. When he spoke, his voice was carefully controlled. "You'll stay here until the threat is properly assessed. Days, maybe weeks. The Jiang syndicate doesn't forgive interference, and you made them look weak." He turned to face me. "But you'll be safe. You have my word." It wasn't kindness. It was strategy. But standing in that study, looking at the man I'd saved, I realized he understood something most people didn't. That sometimes the living are haunted by who they failed to become. "Thank you," I whispered. Viktor nodded once. "Get some rest, Sienna. Tomorrow everything changes." I woke to sunlight streaming through windows I hadn't bothered to cover. For 3 disorienting seconds I forgot where I was. Then reality crashed back. The explosion, Viktor's gray eyes, the fortress I was now trapped inside. Elena had left a breakfast tray outside my door. Fresh fruit, pastries, coffee that smelled like it cost more per cup than I used to make in an hour. I brought it inside but couldn't bring myself to eat. My stomach was still knotted with the sick certainty that saving Viktor Castellano's life had been the biggest mistake I'd ever made. Around 10 I heard raised voices from somewhere below. Male voices, tense and urgent. I crept to the door, cracked it open, listened. Arrived an hour ago, Dante was saying. Courier dropped it at the north gate. Show me. Viktor's voice, sharp as a blade. Curiosity and dread pulled me into the hallway. I followed the voices down the curved staircase, keeping to the shadows, until I could see into Viktor's office through the partially open door. Dante stood at Viktor's desk, a manila envelope in his hands. He'd dumped the contents across the polished wood, photographs, dozens of them, scattered like accusatory evidence. My breath caught. They were pictures of me. On the streets. Huddled against the Meridian Hotel's exhaust vent. Digging through a dumpster behind a restaurant. Sleeping under a highway overpass with my cardboard shelter. 2 years of my life as a ghost, documented in brutal clarity. Someone had been watching me. For months. Maybe longer. There's a note, Dante said, his voice tight. He handed Viktor a small card with Korean characters written in precise calligraphy. Viktor's jaw clenched. Minjun. Now. The translator appeared within minutes, still adjusting his glasses like he'd been pulled from sleep. He took the card, read it, and his face went pale. Well? Viktor demanded. Minjun's voice was carefully controlled. You let a beggar make you look weak. We will correct this. He paused. It's signed with the Jang syndicate seal. The silence that followed was suffocating. Viktor studied the photographs with that terrifying focus, his fingers drumming once against the desk. Then he looked up at Dante. Double the perimeter guards. I want eyes on every entrance, every blind spot. Motion sensors on the east wall. And get me a full background on Park Jin-woo. Bank accounts, known associates, operational patterns. I want to know what he had for breakfast. Boss, they've been surveilling her for 2 years, Dante said. This wasn't random. They knew exactly where she was, what she was doing. They were waiting for an opportunity. Or they're claiming they were after the fact to save face. Viktor's voice was ice. Either way, the message is clear. She's their target now. I pressed against the wall, my heart hammering. 2 years. They'd been watching me for 2 years, documenting my existence like I was an insect under glass. But why? I was nobody. Just another piece of street trash. Unless they'd known. Somehow known I spoke Korean. Known I'd be there that night. Or maybe I'd just been unlucky enough to become useful. That afternoon I was wandering the estate's library, another absurd room filled with first editions and leather-bound classics, when I heard Viktor's voice rising from his study across the hall. He wasn't shouting, but there was an edge to his tone that made my skin prickle. A liability we can't afford. A different voice, older, gravelly with age and cigarettes. The Jang syndicate doesn't make empty threats. They sent those photos to prove they can reach her anytime they want. Which means they can reach you through her. Your point, Marcus? My point is that she needs to disappear. Permanently. Before this escalates into open war. My blood turned to ice. I crept closer to the study door, barely breathing. You're suggesting I kill her. Viktor's voice was dangerously quiet. I'm suggesting you eliminate a problem before it becomes a catastrophe, Marcus said. She's a homeless woman, Viktor. No family, no connections, no one who'll ask questions. One bullet, one shallow grave, and the Jang syndicate loses their leverage. No. Be reasonable. She saved my life. Viktor's voice cracked like a whip. I don't kill people for that. She made you look weak. That bomb was theater, a warning, and she turned it into a spectacle. Now Park Jin-woo thinks you're soft enough to protect a beggar. This isn't about gratitude, it's about survival. I said no, Marcus. The finality in Viktor's tone could have cut steel. She stays under my protection. Anyone who touches her answers to me. That includes the Jang syndicate, and it includes you. Are we clear? A long, tense silence. Clear, Marcus finally said, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. But when this blows up in your face, don't say I didn't warn you. Footsteps approached the door. I stumbled backward, barely making it around the corner before Marcus emerged. A barrel-chested man in his 60s with salt and pepper hair and eyes like chips of flint. He didn't see me, but I saw the disgust on his face as he stalked past. I stood frozen in the hallway, my mind reeling. I wasn't just a witness anymore. I was a symbol. A weakness. A crack in Viktor Castellano's armor that his enemies would exploit until it shattered him completely. And he'd refused to eliminate me anyway. I didn't know if that made him honorable or insane. But standing in that marble fortress, surrounded by men who saw me as a problem to be solved, I realized with bone-deep certainty that the bomb outside the Meridian Hotel had been the easy part. The real explosion was still coming. The sound that woke me wasn't loud, just the soft crack of breaking glass, distant and wrong. For a heartbeat I thought I'd dreamed it. Then I heard the footsteps. Fast. Multiple sets. Moving through the house with practiced precision. My entire body went rigid. I sat up in the too-soft bed, listening to the silence that followed. No alarms. No shouts. Just the quiet click of a door closing somewhere below, and then gunfire. 3 shots, muffled but unmistakable. Then shouting in Korean. They'd come for me. I scrambled out of bed, my bare feet hitting cold marble. My mind raced through options. The door, the window, under the bed like a child hiding from monsters. But before I could move, my bedroom door slammed open. Viktor stood in the doorway, gun raised, his eyes scanning the room with lethal focus. He was in black tactical gear, a Kevlar vest strapped over his shirt, and for the first time since I'd met him he looked like the killer everyone said he was. Bathroom. Now. His voice was a command, not a request. What's happening? 3 intruders. Jang Syndicate. They're here for you. Move. He grabbed my arm and pulled me toward the ensuite bathroom, positioning himself between me and the door. More gunfire erupted from the hallway. Closer now, the sharp crack of it making my ears ring. I heard Dante's voice shouting tactical instructions, heard bodies hitting walls. Viktor pushed me into the bathroom. Stay behind me. Don't move. Don't make a sound. The bedroom door exploded inward. 2 men rushed through, dressed in black, faces covered, weapons raised. Viktor fired twice without hesitation. The first man went down clutching his shoulder. The second dove behind the bed, returning fire. Bullets punched through the doorframe inches from Viktor's head. He moved like water, fluid and inevitable, taking cover behind the bathroom wall while keeping his body between me and the threat. He fired again. The second attacker grunted, stumbled, but didn't go down. Then I heard it, the soft scrape of a window opening behind me. I spun around. The bathroom window, the one I'd thought was too high to reach, was sliding open. A third man was climbing through, moving fast and silent, a knife gleaming in his hand. His eyes locked on mine. Recognition flashed across his face. The beggar from the photos, the woman who'd made his bosses look weak. Viktor! I screamed. But Viktor was engaged with the shooter in the bedroom. The man with the knife was already inside, already moving toward me with terrifying speed. Instinct took over. I grabbed the metal shower rod, the only weapon within reach, and swung it like a baseball bat. It connected with his knife hand with a hollow clang. The blade clattered to the tile floor. He lunged for me anyway, hands reaching for my throat. I swung again, catching him across the temple. He staggered but didn't stop. His fingers closed around my neck, squeezing, cutting off my air. Black spots danced across my vision. I clawed at his hands, gasping, my lungs burning. Distantly I heard Viktor shouting my name. Then suddenly the pressure released. The attacker jerked backward, a red flower blooming across his chest. He collapsed to the tile, lifeless eyes staring at nothing. Dante stood in the bathroom doorway, his gun still raised, his expression carved from stone. The silence that followed was deafening. I collapsed against the bathtub, gasping for air, my hands shaking so violently I couldn't control them. My throat burned where the attacker's fingers had dug in. The shower rod clattered from my grip. Viktor appeared in front of me, holstering his weapon, his hands gentle as he checked my neck for damage. "You're okay. You're safe. Breathe, Sienna." But I couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. Couldn't process that there was a dead man on the bathroom floor, that I'd hit him with a shower rod, that this was real and not some nightmare I'd wake from. "Get medical," Viktor ordered Dante. "And clean this up. I want all 3 bodies removed within the hour. No trace." Dante nodded and disappeared. Viktor pulled me to my feet, guided me out of the bathroom, past the bodies being dragged from the bedroom by men in tactical gear I'd never seen before. He took me to his study, sat me in the leather chair, wrapped a blanket around my shoulders. Then he sat across from me and waited. I don't know how long we stayed like that. An hour. Maybe more. He didn't speak, didn't ask questions, just sat in the darkness while my breathing slowly returned to normal and the shaking subsided to tremors. When dawn finally broke through the windows, painting the study in shades of gray and gold, I looked at Viktor and understood something fundamental. This dangerous man, this killer, this criminal, this ghost who ruled half the city, was the only thing standing between me and death. "Thank you," I whispered. Viktor's expression didn't change. "They'll come again. As long as you're alive, you're a weapon they can use against me. This won't stop until the Jiang syndicate is neutralized." "Then what do we do?" For the first time Viktor smiled. It was grim, cold, but real. "We make sure they regret ever learning your name." 3 days after the attack, Elena sent me to the kitchen for tea. "You look like death," she'd said with her typical warmth. "Chamomile might help you sleep." The kitchen was massive, all granite countertops and professional-grade appliances that probably cost more than my former yearly salary. I was searching the cabinets when I heard voices from the adjoining pantry. 2 guards taking a break, their conversation carrying through the partially open door. "Ridiculous," one of them was saying. 3 men dead, perimeter compromised, all because the boss won't let go of some homeless woman. "Marcus is right. She's a liability." The second guard's voice was younger, uncertain. "The Jiang syndicate is using her to make a point." The point was already made with the car bomb. Everyone knows the Koreans weren't even trying to kill him. It was a message: back off our territory or next time it's real. Standard intimidation play. Ice water flooded my veins. "Wait, what?" The younger guard sounded confused. "But the bomb was theater. A warning shot. They wanted to scare him, not start a war. But then that beggar woman screams her head off and suddenly it's an actual attack. 2 men dead, the whole city watching. Now the Jiang syndicate looks weak because their message got intercepted by street trash." My hands started shaking. "So they're coming after her to save face? They're coming after her to prove Castellano is soft enough to protect a beggar. That he's got weaknesses. And the boss is playing right into it." The first guard's voice dropped. "Between you and me, she should have been disappeared the night of the bombing. But he's losing it over her. Talking about protecting innocents like he's running a charity instead of an empire." I backed away from the pantry, my breath coming in short, sharp gasps. The teacup I'd been holding slipped from my fingers and shattered on the tile floor. Both guards appeared in the doorway, their faces going pale when they saw me. I didn't wait for explanations. I ran. Viktor was in his office reviewing security footage when I slammed through the door without knocking. Dante moved to intercept me, but Viktor raised a hand. "Leave us." Dante hesitated, then walked out, closing the door behind him. I stood there shaking, rage and betrayal burning through my chest like acid. "You lied to me." Viktor's expression didn't change. "About what?" "The bomb. It was never meant to kill you, was it?" My voice came out raw, cracking. "It was theater. A warning. And the words stuck in my throat. I turned it into a real attack. 2 men are dead because I screamed. Because I thought I was saving you." Viktor stood slowly, his gray eyes locked on mine. "Sienna. Don't." I stepped forward, my hands clenched into fists. "You let me think I'd saved your life. You let me believe I'd done something good. But all I did was escalate a situation that would have ended with you walking away untouched. And now they're coming for me, not because I witnessed anything but because I made them look weak. Because protecting a beggar makes you look soft. That's not. You knew. The words exploded out of me. You knew the moment I screamed that warning what would happen. You knew they'd come after me. You knew I'd become the target and you let it happen anyway. Viktor's careful control fractured. His jaw clenched, his hands gripping the edge of his desk hard enough to whiten his knuckles. Yes. I knew. The admission hit me like a physical blow. The bomb was theater, he continued, his voice tight. Standard intimidation. I would have walked away, called their bluff, and we'd have negotiated territories like civilized criminals. He looked away, something like shame flickering across his face. But you screamed and everything changed. Then why keep me here? My voice broke. Why not just let them have me? Why protect someone who only made your life harder? Viktor was silent for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was raw in a way I'd never heard before. 15 years ago my brother Adrian was 14. The Volkov Bratva kidnapped him, demanded I pull out of the waterfront territories. I refused. I thought showing strength would force them to negotiate. He turned to face me and I saw something devastating in his eyes. They sent him back in pieces. And I learned that innocents die in this world because men like me treat them as collateral. My anger wavered. When you screamed that warning, I saw someone who chose to save a life when everything told them not to. Someone brave or stupid or desperate enough to care. His voice dropped to barely a whisper. I couldn't let another innocent die because of this world. Not when I had the power to stop it. The silence stretched between us, heavy with truths neither of us wanted to face. So what now? I asked. They won't stop coming. Viktor's expression hardened back into the mask I recognized. No. They won't. Which means we end this before they get another chance. How? That's not good enough. My voice was steadier than I felt. You don't protect people out of guilt, Viktor. Men like you don't work that way. So tell me the real reason. Why am I still alive? Viktor's jaw tightened. I told you. You told me a story about your brother. About learning that innocents die. I stepped closer to his desk, my hands braced against the polished wood. But that's not why you're keeping me here. That's not why you refused to let Marcus disappear me. That's not why you sat with me until dawn after 3 men tried to kill me in your own house. Sienna. Tell me the truth. The words came out sharper than I intended. Because right now I'm a prisoner in a fortress, with assassins trying to murder me and your own people wanting me dead. I deserve to know why. The silence that followed was suffocating. Viktor stared at me with those storm-gray eyes, and I watched something crack behind them, the careful control he wielded like armor fracturing piece by piece. Finally, he reached for his collar and unbuttoned his shirt. I froze, confused, until he pulled the fabric aside to reveal his left shoulder. A scar ran from his collarbone down past where the shirt concealed it. Thick, jagged, the kind of scar that came from something violent and deliberate. They sent Adrian back in pieces, Viktor said quietly. This is from the first package. His hand still wearing the watch I'd given him for his birthday. His voice was flat, clinical, like he was reading a report instead of describing his own destruction. They'd wrapped it in his favorite t-shirt. There was a note, pull out of the waterfront by midnight or we send more. My breath caught. I thought they were bluffing. I thought if I showed strength, refused to be intimidated, they'd realize I was too dangerous to push. He buttoned his shirt with mechanical precision. I was 26. Building an empire. I believed power was the only language that mattered. Viktor. They sent his foot next. Then his voice cracked just for a second before that iron control slammed back into place. They kept him alive for 6 days. 6 days of sending me pieces of my brother while I convinced myself that negotiating was weakness. That giving in would make me a target forever. I felt tears burning in my eyes. On the 7th day they sent his head. Viktor turned away, staring out the window at his perfectly manicured grounds. There was a note. It said, "This is what caring costs." The devastation in his voice was a living thing, raw and bleeding even 15 years later. I learned that day that caring about someone makes them a target, he continued. That in this world, love is ammunition your enemies will use to destroy you. My rule has been simple ever since. Never save anyone, never protect anyone, never give them something to aim at. He looked back at me and his eyes were haunted. I built an empire on that principle. I became untouchable because I cared about nothing. Then why save me? The words came out as a whisper. Viktor was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was raw in a way that made my chest ache. Because when I saw you scream that warning, this homeless woman, this invisible person that the world had already discarded, you chose to save a stranger's life even when everything told you not to. You had nothing. You were nothing by society's measure. And you still ran toward danger to save someone you didn't know. He stepped closer and I saw the truth written in every line of his face. You're what I killed in myself 15 years ago, he said. That instinct to protect. That reckless, stupid, beautiful impulse to save someone even when it costs you everything. His voice dropped to barely a whisper. I couldn't let them destroy that in you the way this world destroyed it in me. The parallel hit me like a punch to the chest. Both of us broken by children we couldn't save. Both of us carrying guilt that had reshaped our entire existence. Him by closing himself off from caring. Me by throwing myself toward danger, seeking redemption I'd never earn. We're the same, I whispered. No. Viktor's expression softened just slightly. You're what I should have been. What I could have been if I'd made different choices. He turned back to the window. That's why I'm protecting you, Sienna. Because saving you means maybe, just maybe, that part of me isn't completely dead. I stood in that office looking at this dangerous, broken man and understood something fundamental. We were both ghosts haunted by the people we'd failed to save. The difference was he'd buried his humanity to survive. And I'd saved his life trying to resurrect mine. Then help me end this, I said. Not just for me. For both of us. Viktor turned, and for the first time since I'd met him, he looked almost hopeful. All right, he said. Let's rewrite the rules. The video arrived at 9 p.m., sent directly to Viktor's private email with a subject line in Korean that Minjun translated as "Final Warning." I was in the study with Viktor and Dante when Minjun pulled it up on the laptop. The image was grainy, shot in what looked like an industrial space. Concrete walls, exposed pipes, a single hanging light bulb casting harsh shadows. A man sat bound to a metal chair in the center of the frame. Early 30s, Korean, his face already swollen from beatings. Blood dripped from his nose onto his shirt. His eyes were wide with terror. That's Lee Min-ho, Dante said, his voice tight. One of our translators. Works the shipyards. The camera shifted and a new figure stepped into frame. Tall, lean, late 40s with silver-streaked hair and a face carved from granite. He wore an expensive suit and moved with the casual confidence of someone who knew they held all the cards. Park Jin-woo, Viktor said quietly. Head of the Jang syndicate. Park began speaking in Korean, his voice calm and conversational, like he was discussing the weather instead of a man's life. Minjun translated in real time, his voice shaking slightly. Castellano. You've made quite a spectacle of yourself these past few days. The great Viktor Castellano, protector of beggars. Savior of street trash. Park walked in a slow circle around the bound man. The city is watching. Your own people are questioning whether you've gone soft. So let me help you prove your strength. Park pulled out a knife, let it catch the light. Lee Min-ho whimpered. Bring the woman to Pier 9 warehouse. Midnight tonight. Come alone. Park's smile was cold. Or I start sending your men back to you in pieces. One every hour. live streamed for the whole city to watch. The video cut to black. The silence in the study was deafening. Viktor stood so fast his chair crashed backward. Dante. I want full tactical. 20 men, snipers on the adjacent buildings, extraction team on standby. We go in hard and fast, neutralize Park and whoever he has with him. Boss, if we go in heavy, they'll execute Lee the moment they see us coming. Dante was already pulling up building schematics on his tablet. Then we move faster. Viktor's voice was ice. I want infrared mapping of that warehouse. Every entry point identified, counter-sniper positions. Stop. I stood up from where I'd been sitting silently. You can't do this. Both men turned to look at me. If you show up with an army, they'll kill Lee Min-ho before your first man breaches the door, I said. And then you'll have a firefight that spills into the streets. People will die. Innocent people. You'll start a war that burns the whole city. I'm not letting them dictate terms, Viktor said. I'm not asking you to. I stepped closer, my heart hammering. I'm asking you to let me come with you. Let me try to negotiate. Absolutely not. Viktor's expression was carved from stone. I speak Korean. I can. They will kill you the moment you walk through that door, Sienna. This isn't a negotiation. It's an execution dressed up as theater. Maybe. I met his eyes. But maybe Park wants something more than blood. He called you out publicly. He wants to humiliate you, prove you're weak. If you show up alone like he demanded with me, you're calling his bluff. You're showing strength through restraint, not violence. She has a point, Dante said quietly. Viktor shot him a look that could have melted steel. You told me caring about people makes them targets, I continued. That attachments are weapons your enemies use against you. But Viktor, I'm already the target. I've been the target since the moment I screamed that warning. The only question now is whether you let me be helpless or whether you give me a chance to survive on my own terms. Viktor stared at me for a long moment, something warring behind those gray eyes. If I let you come, you follow my lead. You don't speak unless I tell you to. You stay behind me at all times. His voice was hard. And if things go bad, you run. You don't look back, you don't hesitate, you run and you let Dante's extraction team get you out. Understood. Understood. This is insane, Dante muttered. Probably, Viktor agreed. He looked at me and something shifted in his expression. Not warmth, but recognition. Respect maybe. But she's right. Going in heavy starts a war. This way we control the narrative. He turned back to Dante. Position the tactical team as backup only. They move on my signal or if we're compromised. Otherwise they hold position. Dante nodded, already typing commands into his phone. Viktor checked his watch. We have 2 hours. Sienna, get changed into something practical. Dark colors. No jewelry. He met my eyes. And understand this. What we're about to do is the most dangerous thing you'll ever experience. If you have any doubts, any at all, tell me now. I thought of Maya. Of 2 years on the streets. Of 3 men who'd tried to kill me in a bathroom. Of everything that had led to this moment. No doubts, I said. Viktor nodded once. Then let's end this. The drive to Pier 9 was silent except for the hum of the engine and the distant wail of sirens that had nothing to do with us. Viktor sat beside me in the back of the SUV. His expression unreadable, one hand resting on the gun holstered at his side. Dante drove, his eyes constantly scanning the mirrors, the streets, the shadows. I was wearing black jeans and a dark sweater that Elena had left on my bed, practical boots that actually fit. No jewelry, nothing that could catch light or get grabbed in a fight. I looked like I was going to a funeral. Maybe I was. I'm terrified, I said quietly. Viktor glanced at me. Good. Fear keeps you sharp. I mean really terrified. The kind where I can barely breathe. My hands were shaking in my lap. But I can't go back to being invisible. Can't go back to letting things happen while I just exist on the edges. I looked at him. The day Maya died, I was invisible to that moment. Distracted. Not present. And she paid for it. Viktor was silent for a moment. Then, Adrian called me. The day before they killed him. I went still. They let him use a phone for 30 seconds. Probably recorded it to use against me later. Viktor's voice was carefully controlled. He was crying. Begging me to just give them what they wanted. And then right before they cut the call he said, "Don't let them make you a monster, Vic." The pain in his voice was a living thing. "I think about those words every day," he continued. "Wonder if saving him would have made me weaker or stronger. Wonder if the monster I became was inevitable or a choice." He looked at me. "You're not invisible anymore, Sienna. And what we do tonight, it's the opposite of letting things happen." The warehouse loomed out of the darkness like a tombstone. Pier 9 had been abandoned for years, its windows shattered, rust eating through the metal siding. Perfect place for a murder. Dante stopped the SUV 50 feet from the entrance. Thermal shows 9 bodies inside. Park and 8 guards. Lee Min-ho is alive, northwest corner. Backup teams in position? Viktor asked. Affirmative. Snipers have eyes on all exits. Say the word and we can end this in 30 seconds. Viktor checked his gun one last time, then looked at me. Stay close. Let me do the talking unless I signal otherwise. And remember, if I tell you to run, you run. I remember. We walked through the warehouse entrance side by side. The space was vast and empty, our footsteps echoing off concrete. The single hanging bulb from the video cast harsh shadows across 9 figures waiting in the center. Park Jin-woo stood in front, flanked by 4 men on each side, all armed. Lee Min-ho was still bound to the chair, his face a mask of dried blood and terror. Park smiled when he saw us. Castellano. Punctual as always. His eyes slid to me and his smile widened. And you brought your little pet. How sentimental. Viktor stopped 20 feet away, positioning himself slightly in front of me. You wanted me alone. I'm here. Let Lee go. Not quite alone though, are you? Park spoke in English, but his accent was thick. Then he switched to Korean, his voice dripping with contempt. You really have gone soft, protecting garbage from the streets. The great Viktor Castellano, reduced to bodyguard for a beggar. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it, the moment Viktor had warned me about. I could stay silent, let him handle it, stay invisible one more time. Or I could choose to be seen. I stepped forward, my voice steady despite my shaking hands, and responded in Korean. He's not protecting garbage. He's honoring a debt. But you're about to make a mistake that will end you. Park's eyebrows rose. Several of his men shifted, surprised. He laughed, genuinely amused. The beggar speaks. How delightful. He switched back to Korean, his tone mocking. What mistake am I making, little beggar? Threatening a man who's clearly lost his edge. I'd spent 3 days in Viktor's estate overhearing conversations. Guards gossiping. Intelligence briefings I wasn't supposed to hear. Dante's tactical assessments that included background on the Jang syndicate's financial structure. And one piece of information that had stuck in my mind like a knife. Your operation is funded by embezzled money from your own syndicate's leadership in Seoul, I said in Korean, my pronunciation clumsy but clear. You've been skimming from the top for 2 years. The Seoul bosses don't know. Yet. But if Viktor sends them the financial records his people have compiled, they'll execute you themselves. Fully. The way your organization handles traitors. The warehouse went completely silent. Park's smile vanished. His hand moved toward his weapon, but Viktor's gun was already drawn, aimed at Park's head with terrifying precision. She's right, Viktor said in English, his voice cold. I have copies of your financial transactions. Bank accounts in the Caymans. Shell corporations in Singapore. Receipts for a very expensive lifestyle that your bosses in Seoul know nothing about. He smiled that dangerous smile. One phone call and you're a dead man walking. Park's face had gone pale. His men looked at each other, uncertainty rippling through their formation. "So here's what's going to happen," Viktor continued. "You're going to release Lee. You're going to pull your operations back to the original territories we agreed on 2 years ago. And in exchange, your financial secrets stay buried." His eyes were chips of ice. "Or I make that call and you die screaming in a soul basement." Park stared at us, his jaw clenched, rage and calculation warring in his eyes. Finally he spoke, his voice tight. "Cut him loose." One of his men moved to Lee, slicing through the ropes. Lee stumbled forward and Dante's voice crackled in Viktor's earpiece. "Backup team ready to extract." Park looked at me, something like grudging respect in his expression. "The beggar has sharper teeth than you do, Castellano," he said in Korean. Then he turned and walked into the shadows, his men following. We'd won. Outside the warehouse, the November air bit through my sweater. Police sirens wailed in the distance, converging on some other crisis in a city that never stopped bleeding. Dante's extraction team materialized from the shadows, securing Lee Min-ho and disappearing as quickly as they'd come. Viktor stood beside me, his gun holstered, his backup team standing down with military precision. The pier stretched out behind us, dark water lapping against rotting wood pilings. I was shaking, from adrenaline, from cold, from the crushing realization that I'd just negotiated with a crime syndicate and somehow walked away alive. Viktor turned to look at me, and I saw something in his expression I'd never expected to see: respect. Not the calculating assessment of a valuable asset. Not the protective instinct toward someone helpless. But genuine, honest respect. "You didn't just save my life tonight," he said quietly. "You stopped me from becoming exactly what killed my brother. That man who valued strength over everything, who saw compassion as weakness." He paused. "Adrian would have liked you." My throat tightened. I was terrified the entire time. "I know. That's what made it brave." He glanced back at the warehouse where Park Jin-woo had retreated into shadow. "Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's choosing to act despite it." As we drove back through the city, I watched the lights blur past and thought about how much had changed in the span of weeks. From invisible to essential. From homeless to protected. From silent to heard. I'd screamed a warning outside the Meridian Hotel and changed everything. 3 months later, I stood in a modest apartment in Tribeca. 2 bedrooms, clean lines, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. It was mine. Actually mine, with my name on the lease and furniture I'd picked out myself. The photo of Maya sat on my nightstand in a new silver frame, her smile frozen in a moment before everything shattered. The foundation had been Viktor's idea. "You want to honor her memory," he'd said. "So let's do it properly." The Maya Vale Foundation for Homeless Families operated out of a small office near the church where I used to get soup kitchen meals. We provided emergency housing, job placement, mental health services, everything I'd needed and never received. Every person we helped felt like a small piece of redemption, a way to transform my guilt into purpose. Viktor's empire had transformed too. He called it calculated mercy, violence only as a last resort, intelligence and leverage as primary tools. The city's crime rate had actually dropped in the territories he controlled. Fewer bodies, fewer wars, more negotiations. Marcus had resigned in protest. Dante had stayed, adapting to the new approach with the same precision he'd brought to tactical operations. And I'd become Viktor's official translator and strategic advisor, the beggar woman who now sat in rooms where empires were negotiated and destinies decided. Tonight we were in Viktor's study reviewing territory maps spread across his desk. The Jiang syndicate had honored the agreement, pulling back to original boundaries. The Irish were requesting a meeting to discuss waterfront access. The Bratva wanted to negotiate shipping routes. "Here," I said, pointing to a section of the map near the financial district. Park's pulling back created a vacuum. 3 smaller operations are moving in to fill it. If we don't establish clear boundaries now, They'll fight each other and draw police attention. Viktor leaned over, studying where I'd indicated. What do you suggest? Offer them a three-way split with clear territory lines. We broker the agreement, which gives us influence without direct control. They're less likely to fight if they think we're neutral arbiters. He smiled, that rare, genuine smile I'd learned to recognize. 3 months ago you were sleeping on the street. Now you're restructuring criminal territories. 3 months ago, you were planning to start a war over a beggar woman, I countered. Now you're asking for her strategic input. Touché. He made notes on the map, his handwriting precise and controlled. I watched him work, this dangerous man who'd become something more complicated than I'd ever imagined. Not good, not redeemed, but evolving. Choosing restraint over violence. Strategy over bloodshed. We'd both been destroyed by children we couldn't save. But somehow in saving each other we'd found a way forward. The clock on Viktor's desk chimed midnight. Outside, the city blazed with light and life, indifferent to the quiet revolution happening in this study. Viktor looked up from his notes, his storm-gray eyes meeting mine. Thank you, he said, for screaming that warning. For not staying silent. Thank you for listening, I replied. And I realized, sitting in that study with territory maps between us and the weight of impossible choices ahead, that I'd finally found what I'd been searching for since Maya died. Not redemption, that was still a long road ahead. But purpose. I hadn't spoken to another human being in 3 days, but now I speak for an empire, and the man who rules it finally listens.